Our primary aim is to help clients optimize cost associated with various multi-year software licensing contracts of Tier 1 and Tier 2 publishers. We are operating across India, US, Singapore, and UAE. We take pride in our expanding footprint and our valuable 10-year history serving a diverse customer base worldwide. So, starting with a quick round of introduction. So, my name is Akshay, and I'm associated with Silverleaf Solutions from last 2 years, and it's been a great journey over here. I take care of business development for Silverleaf. With me, I have my team members Prerna, Vanshika, Kavya. We are privileged to have with us Mr. Mayank Srivastav, the founder and CEO at Silverleaf Solutions, and Sushrut Parthi, Vice President for Business Development and Strategy. They have a cumulative experience of 30 plus years across various OEMs. Their knowledge will assist you in finding a tailored strategy to optimize licensing costs, ensuring you are only paying for what you need now while setting up a strong foundation for the future. And so, before we begin, we are truly honored to have two distinguished experts with us today, Ravi Yadav and Sharon Ryan, who are part of our esteemed SAP partnership. Their expertise and insights into SAP licensing, FUE optimization, and best practices have helped numerous organizations navigate the complexities of SAP's evolving landscape. So, talking about Ravi, so Ravi serves as the head of sales at Jatitude and is based in Australia. With over 18 years of experience in IT sales and consulting, Ravi joined Attitude in November 24 to lead sales initiatives and strengthen the partner ecosystem. Prior to joining Attitude, Ravi held several senior positions like at Pager Duty, Software One, and Microsoft, where he made significant contributions in driving growth and strategic partnerships. We also have Sharon. Sharon is the founder and partner at Attitude, and she is based in London, UK. Sharon has specialized in SAP licensing for over a decade, successfully delivering SAP licensing optimization projects and license audit programs for some of SAP's largest global customers. Projects delivered by Sharon and her team span Rise with SAP or SAP S4HANA license migrations, mergers and acquisitions, indirect digital access assessments, or cost optimization initiatives. So let me quickly walk you through the agenda for today's webinar. 30 minutes, our practice leaders and experts will talk about their experience and will decode FUE, which is full user equivalent consumption, and share actionable strategies to optimize your SAP S4HANA licensing. We'll take another 10 minutes to address the questions that you have. And in case you have any questions during the discussion, you can type in the questions in the chat box. And then we wrap up the session. So, as SAP continues to evolve, many businesses are struggling with questions such as how do we accurately calculate and manage FUE consumption? What are the key differences between ECC and S4 HANA user license types? How do we ensure cost efficiency while maintaining compliance with SAP license policies? And most importantly, what are the best practices to optimize and future proof our SAP license investments? So these are the real challenges that companies across industries are facing today. Without proper strategies, organizations risk overspending on license, unexpected audits, and inefficiencies in their SAP environment. So thank you so much for joining us. And without further delay, let's dive into today's discussion. We encourage you to stay engaged, ask questions, and make the most out of this webinar. Now I'll request Ravi and Sharon to take the discussion forward. Over to you, Ravi and Sharon.
Thanks, Akshay. Hi, everyone. As Akshay introduced, my name is Ravi Yadav. I'm the head of sales at Zactitude. I'm based out of Australia and I'm heading the sales and partnership ecosystem for Zactitude. Just a brief intro before I hand it over to Sharon. Zactitude is a specialized SAP consulting company. We're headquartered in the UK and we are serving customers across 42 countries currently. There are a lot of services that we provide, but to keep it very short in the interest of time, they're all around making sure that you're getting the best value of your out of your SAP investments, whether that is for the SAP S/4HANA migrations, whether that is for your existing on-premise software that you have for it from SAP. So we look at your contracts, we assist our customers in terms of the commercial analysis, contract benchmarking, making sure that your contracts are right sized. And again, you're getting the best value out of SAP. I'll hand it over to Sharon. As Akshay mentioned, she's the founder and partner at Exactitude. She will talk about the FUE concept at SAP and take you through a deck. Please ask as many questions in the chat as you can, and we'll definitely answer towards the end of the call. Over to you, Sharon.
Thanks, everyone. So it's great to meet you, and we're so happy to see so many people in attendance this morning. We know you're all very busy, so we do appreciate your time to attend. So Ravi and Akshay have already introduced me, so with further ado, I'm just going to go straight in the presentation now. Let me know when you can see my screen. Just give me one moment. Maybe someone could shout out if you can see.
Yeah, we can.
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to go off camera now while I present so that I'm not looking at myself while I'm talking to you all. So Ravi has already given a brief overview on what we do in Exactitude, so I'm not really going to go into detail on that. But just to say that our tagline is to create happy SAP customers. We do this by translating your SAP licensing requirements. So if you're ever in a situation where you really don't understand what SAP is proposing to you, or maybe how the proposal for a RISE with SAP aligns with your current agreement, or maybe you're being positioned to purchase specific products and you're not quite sure how it best fits your organization. What we do is we simplify that and we translate it so that you can understand exactly what it is that you're purchasing, what's the best way of purchasing that, and if it fits your requirements. This is how to get in touch if you have any questions at the end of the presentation. Because it's a licensing topic, it may be that there are some questions you feel more comfortable asking on a one-to-one basis. And if you do, that's fine. We hope you put as many questions as you can into the chat. But if we run out of time, or if you have something very specific, feel free. I've put my contact details here. Or if at the end of the presentation you're convinced and you're thinking, I really like what Exactitude is telling me, and I'd really like to understand how we could work together with both Exactitude and Silverleaf, please do reach out to Ravi. Or if you're not quite sure, you can reach out to either of us, whatever works best for you. The agenda. So today's topic is on FUE consumption, and the agenda is split into four distinct parts. So the first part is, a lot of people ask me the question, so what's the difference between my named user licenses and the S/4HANA user types? What do I have to do differently now that I didn't have to do before I migrated to S4? So we'll just do a high-level comparison on what that looks like so that you can understand. The second thing is to drill into more detail into the FUE concept so that you can understand what's included with the various FUE types, how they're calculated. Then the third is strategies for optimizing your FUE deployment. So here we'll go into detail into terms of like the reports we recommend our customers to run. So we'll give you the advice that we give our paying customers, how to optimize your environment. And this is a mixture of like usage reports, contractual concessions, and so on. And the fourth part relates to best practices for FUE management. What we mean by this is, so if we were in your shoes, if we were deploying FUEs, what we would do. Okay, so first section. So this is this table here. Let me talk you through the rows. So when you had purchased, if you're an existing SAP customer and you had purchased licenses anytime within these dates, so whether it's before 1999, 2000, or since then, you would have purchased named user licenses on one of these price lists. So I'm sure to many of you, these are looking familiar, right? So it could be SAP Business Suite Limited Professional User, maybe it's SAP Application Retail User, or so on. Or maybe if your license agreement is quite old, maybe it's my ERP employee user or my CRM professional user, and so on. Now, when you would have purchased named user licenses from SAP back in the day, you would have signed an order form And that order form would have had, hopefully, if all of the information was in it, it would have had a definition that said a named user is someone who performs, followed by the description of the task. Okay, and this is a very early definition, but it may be in some of your contracts. If some of you belong to very large organizations with very old contracts, and maybe you've kept this definition. And this was a very favorable definition because it very clearly said someone who performs. So it meant if you were a customer and maybe you had deployed 10 licenses, but only 5 were actually using the software, you could argue, well, my definition says it's people who perform the task, not people who are authorized to perform, but people who actually perform. So very quickly, SAP changed this definition to a named user is someone who is solely authorized to access, authorized to perform, or authorized to use. So, and that was SAP's update of this term to make sure that customers were under no uncertainty that if you have deployed 10 users, then each of them requires a named user license. And each user was equals one individual. So for example, if Ravi had a user account to the SAP system, he's one person, so he's one named user. If Sharon Ryan was given access to the SAP system, she's one individual, she's one user. Now, these definitions were based on license definitions. So even though the definition said authorized to access, authorized to use or perform, it was always a bit of a gray area what these authorizations were. Okay, so the license definitions were usually based on a business description. Okay, but that wasn't, there was no quantitative list of authorizations or transactions behind that. It was very much open to interpretation. So this was remedied with the S/4HANA on-premise licenses. So here we see with the S/4HANA on-premise licenses. So this is the official name of it is called SAP S/4HANA Enterprise Management. And then there are 4 license types. So professional, functional, productivity, and developer. And here the license definition remains the same insofar as it's users that are authorized to perform. So again, it's very clear that if you've given someone access, it doesn't matter how often they're using the software, but if they're authorized to access it, well, then they need a license. But the difference, in my opinion, between the ECC and the S/4HANA is that for the first time, SAP released a quantitative list of authorizations and authorization fields that were linked to specific user types. Okay, so if any of you have been tasked running the STAR report, and we'll go into that in more detail, you'll have seen that there's like an Excel file that clearly states what authorizations relate to which specific user type. So it's SAP's way of providing visibility on what, if you're going to give a specific user a specific authorization type and object, well, then you need to make sure that that person has that corresponding license. So on the one hand, it's a positive thing because at least you know where you stand. There's no ambiguity. But then, of course, the bad thing is that for many customers, if you're a long-time SAP customer, your rules and authorizations might have expanded, shall we say. They might have gotten a little bit crazy, and it's trying to make sure that these are cleansed now so that the authorized access reflects exactly what that individual is using. Now, this table that we see in the middle relates to S/4HANA on-premise. And when SAP introduced SAP S/4HANA Cloud, then the authorization objects are pretty much the same. The only difference is that you have one FUE may not necessarily equate to one individual. Okay, so there's different weightings given. So it's no longer one named user license equals one person in most cases, but depending on how you're going to be using the software, it could be that one FUE equals 30 people, 5 people, one person, or if it's a developer, you require 2 FUEs. Now, if you're struggling to understand what that means, don't worry for now, because we're going to go into detail in this in the coming slides very quickly. So the definitions for the SAP S/4HANA Cloud. So whether you've purchased the S/4HANA Cloud Essentials or Extended in the past, or maybe Rise with SAP or Grow with SAP, the S/4HANA functionality within all of these solutions is called SAP S/4HANA Cloud. And the authorized users, again, it's authorized to access. And you can see the definition is usually split between 2 documents here. So there's the service description guide you'll get, depending on which flavor of a deployment model you're going for. And then the general terms and conditions will very clearly say what an authorized user is. It's if you've granted access authorization to use this cloud software, but not necessarily who's actually using it. So this is just a high-level description and a comparison of each. So now that we've discussed the FUEs versus named users, let's go into what that means in the FUE concept. We have, throughout this presentation deck, we have used Rise with SAP. And instead of like going into all the different deployment models, the reason why we've went Rise with SAP is because, number one, it's the most popular type, and it's the one for existing SAP customers they're most likely to invest in. Now, it could be that within your organization, maybe there's like a smaller entity that you're thinking, I'll go to Grow with SAP, or if you're acquiring a company or divesting a company, maybe that makes sense then to go to Grow with SAP. But Grow with SAP is typically for net new mid-market organizations. And if a lot of you are already long-term SAP customers, Rise with SAP is going to be the best fit, I would imagine, 9 times out of 10 for the audience on this call, assuming you're planning on moving to cloud. Okay, so first of all, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the FUE concept. So as I mentioned, there in S/4HANA, there are 4 license types, and the same goes for S/4HANA Cloud. At the top, the most expensive license is S/4HANA for advanced use. And the simple explanation here is that this will permit you to perform any task in S/4HANA Cloud, except developmental activities, okay? Now, you may be able to do system administration tasks related to developers, but in terms of pure developmental work, that's the only thing you cannot do with this license. So this is for an advanced user license type. And if I see and I draw on my own experience, plus looking at SAP's information guides, this type is best suited to, so if you have somebody working in IT support, or if you have someone working in finance, someone working in procurement, not self-service procurement, meaning, for example, Sharon Ryan decides her laptop is broken and she puts in a purchase request, not that type of procurement. But if you were a procurement manager responsible for acquiring direct or indirect services and products for your company, then that would be the best fit for you. Now, the S/4HANA for advanced use, that includes all of the functionality in the next 2 license types. So we see here SAP S/4HANA, the core use, limited solution capabilities. This is, you can, in simple terms, this is the mid-range license type, okay? So it will be in use for most, say, if you were, like, say, a supply chain analyst or an engineering manager, if you worked in R&D, if you worked in sales. One interesting thing is that in the ECC world, SAP would always assign a professional user to sales type individuals. For example, if you had people that were working as field sales and they were sending quotes into SAP or accessing SAP directly for that, they would require a professional user license. But in S4, it's actually these people can get by with the mid-level license type, which is helpful. And then the lowest license type is the S/4HANA Cloud for self-service. This has very limited solution capabilities. It would be mostly used for if you had people maybe working in production or maybe maintenance technicians, Maybe you have people working in a warehouse, like a logistics coordinator. So these are just some examples of some role profiles. Now, we'll see here that at the bottom, there's what one FUE equals. So if you have assigned someone an advanced user type, that follows the same rationale as the named user license. So meaning Sharon Ryan works in procurement and Ravi Yadav works as a finance accountant. We would each require one FUE each because we would have an advanced user type. The ratio is 1-to-1, okay? But let's say we have a team of 5 salespeople. They're field sales representatives, or they have like one team leader and there's 4 representatives. So this team of five core users, this would only be equal to 1 FUE. And then right at the bottom here, we see 1 FUE equals 30 self-service users. So let's say you have a production line with production operatives working on it, and there's a team of 30. They only require 1 FUE. All right. Now, one key difference between S/4HANA and ECC price list types is that approval rights are permitted with all of these use types, okay? And that can really make a big difference to your licensing cost and investment. So I'll give you an example. So let's say you have a production line and there's 30 workers on it. And out of these 30 workers, there are 5 operatives and there are 5 team leaders and 25 operatives. Okay, so the 25 operatives, they do the work, and then the 5 team leaders, they supervise the work, they approve timesheets, they approve vacation, sick leave, or if there's, if the production operative wants to purchase anything, these people will approve all of that. Now, in a previous ECC world, the 5 team leaders would have required either a manager self-service user license, a professional user license, or a project user license. A project user license actually covers MSS functionality, okay? And then the rest of the workers, the 25 workers, they would have probably needed maybe an SAP worker user license. But in this new world, because approval rights are included with S/4HANA Cloud, assuming it's just managerial self-service related tasks and they're not doing anything other than that, then all 30 people, both the team leaders and the production operatives, they can all be included, they can all get the same license. So in this case, 30 self-service users equals 1 FUE. So in my opinion, from having done a lot of RISE with SAP assessments, I would say probably over 120 since RISE assessments since 2021. So some of these projects are like quite detailed, taking many months, and some of them are quite high level, meaning just like a high level review of the proposal and giving high level feedback. But in my opinion and experience, I would say that it's not being aware of factors like this, that maybe you're giving team leaders and managers a professional user license in ECC, that won't be required in S/4HANA Cloud. So that can really make a big difference to your cost. And then this 4th license, that's for developer access. So people that are actually using the developmental tools. And here we see that 1 individual would actually require 2 FUEs. That's how it's weighted. Now, this is a very, very busy slide, so I'm not going to go into detail in this. But I spoke to you in the previous slide about what functionality, as at a high level, is included with each of the S/4HANA Cloud license types. And if you wanted to get more detail on it, well, this is a nice summary slide that SAP have actually released publicly. And at the bottom, you'll see here I've put in the link for you. So if you're interested after this call to have a look at it, you can go online and you can find the link yourself, and you can go into it and you can see what's included with each of the license types. I'm not going to go into detail on this now, but it's there for your review. And of course, if you have any questions, well, then you can reach out to Ravi or I and you can ask. Okay, so I've spoken now several times about how one FUE sometimes does not necessarily equal one human being. And just in case you want to see a practical example of this, I'm giving you a side-by-side comparison of if you were to purchase the same number of FUEs in S4HANA on-premise versus S4HANA on cloud. So let's say you are doing your license sizing because you want to move to S4, and you identify that you're going to need 20 developers, 345 for professional, 180 functional, and 490. This comes to 135 individuals, right? Which in this case equals 1,035. Sorry, it's I haven't had my coffee of the day yet, so I tripped over my tongue there. So 1,035 individuals. So this equals 1,035 named users. But if you decide as part of your comparison exercises, and this is something that we do for customers as well, when customers are moving to RISE with SAP or S4HANA, we do modeling across both types so that you can really see the comparison side by side, and you'll know how many licenses you require under each deployment model. So we see here, it's the same number of individuals, right? 1,035. But with the FUE weighting, it actually comes to 438. So we have rounded up this figure because obviously, we see that there's 16.3 here, but you can't have 0.3 of a human being, right? So it's 438 FUEs. So loosely speaking, S4HANA Cloud Developer Access maps to the S4HANA On-Prem, advanced maps to professional, functional to core, and productivity to self-service use. So this is a pretty solid example. And this is when you are calculating the FUEs as well. And maybe some of you have already had these conversations with SAP. But if you decide to move to RISE with SAP or grow with SAP, there's like a system size, so like t-shirts, right? Starting at extra small and then moving up to double XL, as you see here. Now, one thing to be aware of is that if you have an on-premise environment, it doesn't really matter how many users you have deployed on it, right? So if you spin up an ERP production system, whether you have 6 users or you have 6,000, so what? But SAP doesn't care. Maybe you care in terms of like user management and maybe performance issues on the underlying infrastructure. But fundamentally, SAP has sold you the perpetual licenses, so it's of no concern to them. But with RISE with SAP, you also have to, when they sell you RISE with SAP, they're selling you application software, they're selling you infrastructure, and they're selling you services. And that is tied or capped to a certain number of FUEs. So when we're supporting customers determining what FUEs they require, we will look and see, okay, so 438, that means that strictly speaking, you're on t-shirt size extra small. But if let's say some of you are aware of this, with RISE with SAP, the FUEs and with Grow with SAP as well, they are sold on a tiered basis, right? So the smallest tier will have the highest unit cost, but as you move down tiers, so as you go from small to medium to large, so on, the unit cost is cheaper. So sometimes, even though you've determined I really only need 438, but if you think that maybe you're going to be expanding, or maybe with some of the infrastructure, it increases as you go up a t-shirt size, you have to not only be aware of the limitations of FUEs, but you also have to be aware of the infrastructure limitations. Now, I will share one example of this later in the presentation. It's not the key topic of today, but it does make a big difference in really understanding. You need to be aware of it when you're negotiating your agreement with SAP, so that you weigh up, okay, if you need, like, say, maybe a minimal additional amount of memory and storage, and you're on the high side of the current tier, sometimes it makes sense to jump into the next tier because it's cheaper to do that than maybe purchasing additional system and memory extensions. So it really depends. So here we have on the bottom left corner, just like the high level steps that we would do if we were in your shoes. So determine the quantity of users required, and please, please do watch out for S4 not being one for one with ECC Business Suite or applications. And just to really emphasize, if you have people that are a professional user right now in ECC, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to need a professional user license in S4HANA Cloud. So please, please be careful of that. And then once you've determined the number of individuals, then map to FUEs, map to the t-shirt size, which is, you see the step here, and then cross-check your t-shirt size with your infrastructure requirements and the unit price to see if it's more cost-effective to move up a tier. Okay, time for the third part. So strategies for optimizing your FUE deployment. And when I say strategies for optimizing your FUE deployment, these are tasks that you can do at any stage. So if you have just signed a Rise with SAP agreement and you haven't done these tasks, we'd recommend you do them pretty quickly, okay? And like on the flip side, if you haven't purchased Rise with SAP, but you're interested to do so, we would recommend you start these tasks so that you get a head start. Why am I saying this? With Rise with SAP with private metering, SAP is going to have visibility on your estate. Okay, they're going to know the number of FUEs that are deployed. So at the moment, there's still, the figures are considered to be indicative because people might not be on the correct support list for accurately counting the FUEs, or maybe the SAP has given you like a breathing room. If you purchase, for example, if you purchase the Rise with SAP deal now, I'll give you some time to sort out your roles and authorizations. But we would strongly, strongly recommend that you make this a priority. Don't wait for it to be an issue, do it proactively. Okay, so strategies for optimizing the FUE deployment. I'll start off with the most common one. So here we see that there's a box and a box and a box. So at the lowest box, we see the transactions. So this is what people are actually using. When they log into the SAP software, they execute a transaction. This is what you're actually using. And these transactions are bundled into the authorizations that you permit users to access, and they belong to a role that you've assigned. So most organizations will have roles that they will have assigned to specific individuals. So if you have someone working as a production technician, they should, if you have a good handle on your roles, have very different authorizations and access, say, maybe compared to like a financial accountant, a business analyst, or senior management within your organization. But sometimes what people are authorized to use versus what they're actually using is very, very different. Okay, so in order to make sure that you have only the smallest number of FUEs possible, it's really important to close the gap between the authorized usage and actual usage, because with S4HANA Cloud, SAP are focusing on their authorized to use and not the actual usage. And because it's quantitative now, meaning that there's specific authorizations mapped to specific license types, SAP's argument is strengthened in any debate you might have with them. So in order to avoid having this debate in the first place, it's important to close the gap. And if your role profile looks like this, then you probably won't have any issues, okay? So if you have one role maybe for finance, one for logistics, and one for maybe self-service users, then that's going to be nice and clean. It'll be easy to define. You'll know, for example, if Ravi is a financial accountant and Sharon is a production operative, well, Sharon gets role profile 4 and Ravi gets role profile 1, and there's not going to be any overlap. But if your roles and authorizations look something like this at the moment, then that could get very expensive for you very quickly. So it's just, we would really, really recommend that you take steps to sort this out. There are a number of very useful third-party tools on the market. SAP have their own tools as well that you can use. So as we can see here, if you have like all of these roles, even if you assign someone one role, they could overlap, it could be that you need to assign people multiple roles, and some of those multiple roles may contain authorizations that you don't want the user to have. So I can't emphasize enough. This needs to get sorted, and it needs to get sorted quickly to avoid any nasty surprises for yourself. And most customers, unfortunately, and maybe it sounds like I'm stereotyping here, but again, I'm just going on my experience. Maybe all of you on the call, your role profiles look like this, but the majority of SAP customers that I've worked with, the roles look like here on the right, unfortunately, and that's nobody's fault per se. It's more that we're not trying to like say that anyone's in the wrong. It's just more that the roles have evolved. Most customers have been an SAP customer several decades, right? And business organizations change, and SAP hasn't really looked at this previously, unless maybe you've been audited. But so it's not been a focus area. But what the message we're trying to give with this slide is, it needs to be a focus area now. So we would recommend that you close the gap as quickly as you can. Now, how would you do that? Because it's all very well my saying, oh, well, your roles are a mess. But you're probably thinking, well, what are the steps I would take in order to do that? So at a high level, this is what we would recommend if we were in your shoes. So the first one would be to perform a license measurement exercise to determine actual usage, meaning running SAP usage reports, or maybe if you have a software asset management tool, that you look at the actual usage and then you check, okay, such and such, for example, Sharon Ryan is assigned a professional user license, but I know for a fact she only works in a warehouse. So maybe she can get downgraded to a limited professional use. That's the type of thing I mean. And just to really understand, okay, what am I actually using? What is correct? And once you have that, then there are specific prerequisites that notes you can implement in your SAP system to ensure that the private metering will be calculated correctly. Okay, these are quite technical, so we can go into, if you have questions for me, you can let me know. But you need to be on the latest SAP system release. So if you are on older releases, the chances are, if you run the reports that we see in step 3 here, that won't be an accurate representation. Okay. So once you've completed the prerequisites in terms of upgrading to the latest SAP release, then the third step would be to run these following SAP reports in your production system and your development system. So there's a different one for each type of system. And what that will do, that will show you the user classification based on the roles and authorizations. So then you'll be able to compare that with with step 1 here. So it may be, using myself as an example, if Sharon Ryan was, you've identified that she works in a warehouse and she only needs a limited professional user. But if Sharon Ryan has been given maybe 10 roles because there's not one role that exactly matches her profile, then the chances are she might have been upgraded to a professional user. And you can check then what roles and authorizations are causing that, and you can help bridge the gap. Sometimes what I would do at this stage as well is bearing in mind, so these 3 steps, step 1 focuses on the usage, right? What you're actually using. And step 3 here focuses on the roles and the authorizations. But then when you are trying to bridge the gap, you will have to also remember that not ECC license mapping isn't the same as S4. So for example, if you find out that there's a lot of sales users, you may need to change their license type because they can now get by on the middle one. So that busy slide I gave you with the URL link, you can actually check that and you can think, okay, well, I know that these are the type of users, these are the user types associated with this type of solution capability. And now you can adjust the rules and authorizations to close the gap. For some customers, this might be an easy thing to do. For others, you may require some external support, maybe from your system integration partner, or maybe, again, there are some tools available on the market that they can help you right size and automate this process. So it really depends on your personal preference and your budget, what it is you want to do. We don't actually sell tooling, just to be clear on that. If you ever want any recommendations, we can certainly give them to you because we come across them a lot. We can give you an independent view on what we believe would be best for your situation. But the purpose of this slide is more not to tell you you need to buy tools, but more to explain how you could address this within your organization. Okay, another strategy for optimizing your FUE deployment. So I mentioned a couple of slides ago how infrastructure is closely tied with the FUE count. Okay, so this comes from this table that you see here. It's a summarized table from a very lengthy document that SAP, the service description guide, and I've used the flavor Rise with SAP S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition Premium. This is the flavor that seems to be most popular amongst a lot of SAP customers. It's certainly the one that sells the most, again, basing it on our experience. So this is the one we've used. So you can see here, I'll just explain it quickly. So this is the t-shirt, this is the size of the system, and this is the maximum number of FUEs. So the extra XXS, you can only have up to 135 users. And you can see that there's no quality system here, but there's only a development and production. Whereas if you start from size extra small, then you do have a 3-tiered environment. Now, why we say you align the FUEs with the infrastructure requirements would be that if, let's say, you were on size XXS, and you decided that you needed some extra memory, right? Then going from XXS to XS here, it's still 256 gigabytes, okay? So that's not really going to make a difference. Whereas if you're going from extra small to small, then that doubles. So you have to weigh up. So first of all, the number of FUEs you genuinely require. Find out your infrastructure requirements, what the memory and storage is that you'll require. And then from there, the path to deciding, okay, does it make sense to jump up an extra t-shirt size, or does it make sense to just purchase a memory extension? That will present itself at that stage. So we do a lot of simulations with customers that way, and we would recommend that whereas when it comes to Rise with SAP, if you have end user departments and they're sharing with you their user requirements, and you have another team that's looking after the infrastructure, we can't emphasize enough, these teams need to talk to each other, okay? There can't be any siloed activities, because the customers that sign the worst deals are the ones where things are done only by specific technical teams, or only by procurement, or only by end users. The best deal is always secured in a Rise with SAP agreement from all departments talking to each other, because everything is more connected and integrated once you move to cloud from a licensing perspective. Another strategy, so we've spoken on the technical side, now let's switch to our contracts. So a lot of, so I would say maximize your contractual concessions with Rise. So we find that sometimes if you purchase like Rise today, okay, even if you go live, there may be like multiple go lives. So let's say you purchase Rise today and you plan that, well, would really like to migrate our core finance first. That makes sense. And then maybe in year 2, we'll bring over some other line of businesses. And then in year 3, maybe we'll implement GRC, and that will monitor the whole user population. And by then everyone will be using it anyway, so that's fine. So when you are having these discussions with SAP, we'd recommend you don't subscribe to the full quantity upfront. Find out what FUE tier is going to be the best fit for you. So if, let's say, you decide you're going to require, I'll go back to this slide for a second, 551 users by the end of year 5. So it makes sense, instead of purchasing 550 and extra small, purchase 551, because that way you'll get the unit price associated with the t-shirt size small, but you won't be using all of the licenses. You only need to use them in the last year of the subscription. So really, as well as having a think about how many licenses you're going to require overall, have a think about when these users are actually going to be using the actual software, and then negotiate with SAP a ramp up if you haven't already. Okay. if you already have signed your agreement with SAP, or maybe you were about to, one thing, and SAP, to be fair to them, are being quite reasonable in that they're offering a lot of customers remix rights. Okay, so meaning you within the bill of material you've purchased, you'll be able to on once a year, you'll be able to swap out software you've decided you need less of or you don't need anymore for software you require more of. And we find a common occurrence is that great care and attention is taken by customers to negotiate this at the start of the agreement, but then people get busy and people forget. And next thing you know, the anniversary has passed, and suddenly there's a spike in users, and you have to purchase those licenses outside of the remix clause instead of swapping in. So we would recommend that if you haven't negotiated the remix rights, or that hasn't come up in your conversations yet, that you ask for it. And then secondly, that you allocate sufficient time to maximize them. Okay, don't just sign the agreement and think, well, procurement will remind me, or on the flip side, procurement will think, well, my SAP security and basis team, they'll let me know if there's a spike of users, because they might not even know. It might come out of the blue. So again, every team in the organization should talk to each other, and they should plan for this so that they really squeeze every drop of value you can out of your SAP Rise with SAP agreement. Just take a little drink of water, and we're about to move on to the last section. Okay, best practices for FUE management. So the coming slides are all structured the same. Okay, this is what we would recommend you do. Okay, so this is our recommendation in the big bold writing here. This is why we think you should do it, the benefit you'll get from doing it, and then the impact of not doing it. So first one, and it might seem obvious, but measure your existing licenses and expire those that no longer require access. Sometimes we get customers that say, well, our HR report says that we've only 10,000 users, but if this isn't an SAP report, then sadly, that's not really worth much. It should be based on the number of user accounts that are actively deployed. Or sometimes we get customers that say, well, they haven't logged on, so we've locked them. To be really clear and specific about this, unless the validity date is expired, meaning the validity date is yesterday or the day before, those users will still show up as active. Even if you've locked them and they can't actually access the software, they will still show up. So it's important to make sure that you do that. And of course, the benefit of this is that, why you should do that is the actual usage might be less than anticipated. And this will, give you the benefit of avoiding any unnecessary shelfware. And if you don't do this cleanup exercise and you just map it to your current licenses, there will be overspend that could have easily been avoided. Second thing would be to be aware of any organizational changes that might impact FUE demand. So you want to make sure that the FUEs are procured at the optimal tier, right? So, that you get the most cost-effective price tier. But be careful when to also factor in organizational changes. So for example, if you are purchasing on maybe tier size S, but then your company has plans to maybe acquire a company that will double in size in the next 5 years, well, then it makes sense to maybe plan for a longer time. Or on the flip side, if your company has plans to divest a business unit that will have the majority, and the majority of FUEs are there, you just need to make sure that you don't leave yourself open to anything that might reduce in overspend or a spike in unused subscriptions at a later stage. And you want to make sure the benefit of taking care with this step is that your cloud consumption costs are right-sized. The third best practice is make sure your SAP systems are at a release compatible for private metering. Frankly, we're not technical people, so we're not going to go into specifics on what releases they are, but it should be on the latest release you can. because otherwise the reason is the FUE consumption may not be actually captured. We see some customers that aren't aware of this, and then they go to SAP to purchase additional licenses that maybe they don't necessarily need. So the benefit of ensuring that your SAP systems are at a release compatible for private metering will mean that A, if you run the reports, it'll be a true representation of the usage, but B, it also means that maybe you can share this feedback with SAP if SAP query the number of users, and you can say, we get it, it looks higher than what it is, but we're in the middle of an upgrade now, and that's why this is an issue for the moment. So if you don't do this, the FUE count may be unnecessarily inflated. So just take the time to do that. We've already discussed the notes in a couple of slides ago. You might have remembered we gave like 4 steps on how to close the gap between authorized access and actual usage. So this is the step for the production systems, okay? So once you run this note, then this is the report you will extract, and that will help you understand the roles and authorizations and what's causing, maybe it's quite common to see maybe sometimes you run this report and it's showing that 90% of your users require professional user licenses. And maybe if you're a manufacturing company, you're thinking, whoa, that's definitely not the case. It's almost always due to rules and authorizations needing to be cleaned up. So it's important to do that, okay? And performing it before you migrate to RISE, it just means you're doing this before you have these conversations with SAP. I mean, you can still have them, and we support customers in framing these conversations with SAP, but ideally you'll have this done beforehand so that you don't have to do it retrospectively. And the impact of not doing so, it will just mean that you have an excessive count of advanced users that you probably don't need to purchase, that could actually, those users could actually get by with a core or a self-service license type. The next best practice, this is on the developer side. So if you run this note here, this report will show you how to verify users identified as developer users. I mean, developer users have always been the most expensive license type, right? Both in cloud and in the on-premise environment. So it makes sense to run the note and see, okay, are there users that are currently given access, developmental access? Could this be right-sized? Could I deactivate these users, or are they only performing system admin tasks? And maybe I can adjust their roles and authorizations to reflect the fact they're not actually doing any they're not doing any creating or modifying code. They're just doing pure system admin, and assign them an advanced user license type instead. Next recommendation would be to align your actual usage with service description guide and the feature scope descriptions. So the SDG, when you sign your agreement with SAP, they will have given you a copy of it, but if you've misplaced it, the SDG guides are available online, but I'm sure you have a copy of it, and it will show you functionality that's included with each of the S4HANA user types. And if you want to get a more detailed, like let's say, for example, there's something called warehouse management, by looking at the FSD, the feature scope description, and that's like a big several hundred page document, but it'll go into detail on the solution capabilities for warehouse management, and you'll be able to see then, okay, well, I'm reading this functionality and I can see that, yes, this is all my user is doing, so therefore I'm quite satisfied that the self-service user license type is better. And just it means that any roles, if you have to redesign roles and authorizations, it makes sense to not do it based on what you think it is, but that it's actually based on facts, that it's actually based, any redesigned roles and authorizations are based on the RISE with SAP contractual license definitions, so that there's no underspend or overspend. Next best practice, categorize the SAP systems in SAP for me. What do I mean by that? So in ECC, to access a specific engine and log onto the system, you would have required an SAP named user license, but that's not necessarily the case for some S4HANA engines, okay? And if you have a production system and the only functionality has these SAP engines that don't require a named user license, then it makes it, there's a specific user type you can assign them called an engine user license type. It's a free, double inverted commas, free in the sense that you don't have to purchase an FUE for it, but not free in the sense you do have to purchase the engine. So if you have SAP systems with only these type of engines not requiring user licenses, it makes sense to segregate those systems and then into core and mixed. And the impact of not doing so is that the FUE count may be unnecessarily inflated. You may have given licenses to people that don't require them. So one of the tasks we do, and you can do for yourself, or if you want our support with it, would be to look through the bill of material that you're going to purchase from SAP. We'll be able to identify which engines actually require an S/4HANA Cloud license type, how that impacts your FUE count, and then give you guidance on how to categorize the specific systems in SAP for me. The next practice would be to implement the correct price list. I have lost count of the amount of times I have seen very legacy price lists listed in an S/4HANA Cloud system. What do I mean by this? So let's say and one way of checking very quickly at your side, if you go into SAP and you run the transaction USMM or USMM2 or USMM_old, and then download a log file, that will show you the price lists that are deployed on the system and the default user type. And sometimes we see customers that maybe if you're doing a brownfield implementation and you're just doing like a system copy and the price list isn't updated. This means that you see on an S/4HANA Cloud system that there's individual components or SAP R3 or SAP applications, and that's just wrong. So it's like a super quick thing to do. It doesn't changing the price list or deselecting users belonging to a legacy agreement. It won't change the user's ability to actually access the software. It's purely an admin thing, so it can be done pretty quickly. I've even done it myself for customers. So when we're supporting customers with our projects, I've experience in extracting SAP usage reports. But even doing this, it's an admin thing. You don't need to go near rules and authorizations to do it. You're just simply changing the license type. So it's just something to consider doing, because otherwise, if you have the wrong license type, or if you haven't assigned a user type to a customer as to a user in the system, the default classification will be counted based on the rules and authorizations, and that could get very expensive very quickly. So it's important just to take these steps to do. And the benefit to you will be that the private metering of RISE with SAP FUEs will be significantly increased. And now we come to the end of our presentation. I have spoken for a long time. I hope I haven't spoken too quickly. Irish people do that sometimes. But I will say now the floor is yours if you have any questions at all. I know we're running out of time, but depending on if people want to stay on for a couple more minutes or if you want to reach out to have any other questions, we'd be glad to hear from you. Over to you, Akshay.
Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, so they can just raise their hand or maybe unmute their mic and ask the questions. We're there to help.
Hi.
Yeah, Kumar Swami. You can unmute and ask.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. That's what a great session. Sharon wants to know how we will manage the interface logins. We must be having some service logins. We must have used some interfaces using an API and all. So how that will be classified, how that needs to be addressed.
Okay, if I'm understanding you correctly, and I will caveat that I am not a technical person here, so those users would be non-dialogue technical user types. So long as they would have a future or current validity period, that shouldn't be affected. And they don't require a license classification. The same goes for that in ECC as well. By the way, sometimes we see customers classifying non-dialogue technical types with the licenses. You don't need to do that, and it does inflate the licensing.
No, but Sharon, we will classify them in the service. We will not put them as a dialogue user. We will put it as a service. So service login, we need not to worry, right?
That's right. Yes.
That's what you are saying.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Great. And what will happen for the system ID if we classify them as a system ID?
So do you mean like the actual system itself, like for example, PRD or POP, that type of thing?
Yeah.
I think the system ID you can just pick I mean, I'm seeing other customers, they just pick the system ID that best fits what they want to call it. That doesn't impact the licensing at all. It's just more the system classification type that impacts the licensing. But you can call it SIP, PIP, ZIP, whatever you like.
Okay. Sharon, I also have a query on the digital license policy.
Yep.
So how that will be addressed if a customer is in RISE and consider there is an data that we need across a system, it will be pushed from a third-party application. Do we need to go for a digital license policy altogether, or how that is managed?
So that's a very interesting question. And what I'm seeing in the market is that customers are receiving the message from SAP that once you move to S/4HANA, and particularly RISE with SAP, you must move to digital access, but you don't have to do it. It's only if it makes sense for you to do it. Now, one thing I will flag there, and what I've seen recently, is that if you're a grow with SAP customer, they are including that in the base functionality, but they're not, so which would imply that in future they are going to convince customers grow that you must go the digital access. But for RISE with SAP customers, that's not the case. And what I would say to every customer is that if you are digitizing your processes, sometimes it makes sense to go to digital access, right? It's not the evil license model that many people think it is. I'll give you an example. I had a manufacturing company where they had 20,000 suppliers that were connected to the SAP system via EDI. Now, I hope you agree with me, if you were to give all 20,000 users an SAP named user license, tracking that would be a nightmare and it would be expensive, particularly if these customer suppliers are only sending 1 or 2 documents in. But then on the flip side, if the majority of your indirect digital access exposure is only caused by maybe a large internal team, let's say your sales organization uses Salesforce and you don't really have any external connections, and these maybe small team of sales are creating millions of documents, then it makes sense just to assign them a named user license and not go down the digital access route. But the trick is you have to look at the digital access across all of the interfaces. You can't cherry pick. You can't say, well, the suppliers will get the digital access and the internal teams will get a named user license. Doesn't work that way. It's one or the other.
Thanks, Sharon.
Pleasure.
Thanks.
We have questions, Sharon, in the chat as well.
Okay, let me
If
have a
you
look at
can-
it. Thanks for flagging. Okay. Is the strategy the same if we move to private cloud? Yes. And then the digital access license, I think I've answered that already. And then let me know more details on the digital access license on premise and FUE license. I mean, the digital access license model, how you would measure that is the same with on-prem. So I mean, there are 2 ways of estimating the count. There's the digital access estimation note, and then there is the passport. In my passport is meant to be accurate, but in my experience, it depends very much on the correct SAP release. And I would say that if I was in any customer's shoes, what I would do is run the digital access estimation note and then do a very detailed mapping against the interfaces that connect with SAP, so that you can, because sometimes maybe if like subsequent documents are being counted, you know, it's good to just like weed out all of those and make sure that you pay for as little as possible. But it's the same whether it's cloud or on-prem, it doesn't change. There is, I think, a subcategory, if I recall correctly, a subcategory that's only available in S/4HANA that's not available in cloud, but that's just like a minor thing. It's more like a reallocation of a document type. The document count itself is still valid. Any other questions? I will emphasize if you don't have any questions. Is audit log provided to customer of the usage of the service? Do you mean that will you get a report from SAP showing the software being used? Is that the question? If you can just write yes or no in the chat, that would be good. Okay, I'll assume the answer is yes, but you know, feel free to ping if I've misunderstood your question. So with once you move to private cloud, you will get, I'm sure many of you are familiar with SAP for Me portal. And if you go into the finance and legal tab and then go into consumption, it will show, and you go scroll down to private metering, it will show the usage, but it will show it at a very high level, right? So if you have purchased, say, maybe 20 licenses and 10 have been deployed, it won't show you if they're actually used. It'll just show you that they're deployed. So it's a good indicator, I think. And SAP, to be fair, are giving good steps, but yeah. So more than FUE numbers can log in. So the private metering will show how many are logging in. No, it'll just show the number of accounts that are deployed with an active validity period. It won't show logins. It won't go into that level of detail. If you want to filter out the users that are actually using the software versus being authorized, that won't show.
Yeah, hi, Sharon. I have a question regarding the developer FUE. So how is that counted? And will that be estimated to the production billing, or how basically the measurement happen for the developer FUE?
Okay, so with the developer FUEs, so when you're creating a developer, you will create rules and authorizations for that developer. And assuming that users have developer-related authorizations, SAP will identify that, and then they will count those users as developers. I find a lot particularly in on-premise systems, many times users are assigned a developer user license, even though they're only doing system admin. So it's the same, the same methodology, whether it's developers or operational users. The only difference is the note that you run on the development systems to identify those users. And the note will give you the list of authorizations as well. So you'll be able to see by looking at that.
So it's again based on the user authorization, and it's not the developer key.
Yeah, there's no developer key in S4.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is no developer.
I think we've time for one or two more questions, but I will emphasize as well that licensing is a sensitive topic. So if there's a question you'd love to ask, feel free to, ping us separately and we can have a call to discuss your requirement.
Sure.
Hi. All right. Well, great speaking to you all. Thanks so much for the time and loved hearing all of your questions as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you everybody for joining us. We really appreciate all the support. We have one more question, Sharon.
Okay, so if you have, so unfortunately, like if you have been using, if it goes over if let's say you've purchased 551, but it turns out that 560 have been deployed, what will happen in that scenario is that it will show that you have overconsumed your licensing, and then SAP, your account manager, will reach out and tell you that you need to discuss purchasing additional memory or storage, or that you need to move up t-shirt size. And that can be a very nasty surprise. So it makes sense to really keep a tight track of that.
Hope it's clear, Subhash.
I think if we have 1 FEV, and if a user are more and wanted to log in, that login our system will give the warning that your license has exceeded, or more user cannot be logging.
So there won't, unless this is like there's some technical cap. I'm not aware of that, but what I am aware of is that users are able to go over the threshold, but that instigates action from SAP then that you have to fix this in terms of maybe purchasing additional licenses, or maybe you can argue with them that give you some time to reduce the user count. Is multiple login allowed? No. Well, see, the thing is with multiple login, it's a functionality, right? So Is it allowed from a functional perspective? Yes, because sometimes it's just required. But if you're asking, are you allowed to share accounts due to multiple login? No, the same principles apply. Each user requires their own license. We probably need to wrap up now. I'm afraid I've another meeting to go to shortly, but it was great speaking to you all. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We'd be glad to help at a later stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Ravi, for the wonderful session. Thank you, our esteemed audience, for having a very interactive discussion. We hope that you found today's discussion valuable and that you gained some insights into how Silverleaf and Gratitude you have a clear roadmap on how to manage your SAP license effectively and avoid common pitfalls. Your feedback is incredibly important to us as it helps us improve and tailor our services to better meet your needs. So on the screen, you have the QR code for the feedback form. You either can scan it now or keep an eye on your inbox. We'll be sending you shortly. So today's webinar was the final one for this quarter. We have many more lined up for you in the next quarter. The invitations will come subsequently, but we thought we'll just let you know. So in case you have any questions or your team members have any, they are keen to attend on how they can help you save cost. Any other questions that you anybody has in the call, they can just let us know. We are available at info@silverleafsolutions.com. Thank you so much for joining in. Have a good day. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ravi. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Sharon. Bye.
Thank you, team.